Polka, polka. Polka, polka.
Good morning. Our opening words this morning are by Sylvia L. Howe. We bid you welcome on this first Sunday of the year, New Year. Like Janus, we gather with part of us looking backwards and part of us looking forward. We gather on the edge of the new year, saddened by our losses, cherishing our joys, aware of our failures, mindful of days gone by. We gather on the cusp of this new year, eager to begin anew, hopeful for what lies ahead, promising to make changes, anticipating tomorrows and tomorrows. We invite you to join our celebration of life, knowing that life includes good and bad endings and beginnings. We bid you welcome. And so, I just want to welcome you with live from Fellowship Hall. This is our LCUUF Sunday service. We have a few announcements, but they were on a slideshow before the service, so I'm not going to repeat. If you didn't see them, don't worry. I'll post them tomorrow in the sharing.
Our chalice lighting words today are by Lois Van Leer. We light this chalice on the brink of a new year, letting go of what has been, open and hopeful for what may come, renewed, restored, ready to live life fully anew. May we move forward with intention. Please light your chalice and join us in singing, "We kindle this light in celebration for the life that we share."
We kindle this light in celebration for the life that we share.
Each week, we take time to remind ourselves that we belong to a community which cares for each other. We do this by sharing any significant joys or sorrows in our lives. If you have a joy or sorrow to share today, you can type it into the chat now, and we'll read those aloud. First, let us voice our sorrows or concerns, whatever you or the world may be holding that is in need of our healing and caring thoughts. You are welcome to type sorrows and concerns in the chat box.
Sorrow from Colleen, me. I have a sorrow that we've got some family rift going on, but they love you.
Well, it looks like we don't have any sorrows today. That's wonderful. Now let us recall the joys, whatever you may be celebrating, whatever evokes a feeling of joy or peace for yourself or others. You are welcome to type joys in the chat box.
We have a joy from Liz Mulder. She says, "Happy New Year, everybody. I miss you. Vaccines are coming mid-month, I last heard." Joy from John Ward. "We made it to 2021. Hallelujah." A joy from Howard Frederick says, "Joy that the time draws nearer that we will finally move to Lakeside." Joy from Colleen. "We had a marriage in the family. My nephew Gregory married his longtime girlfriend Delmy on May 29th. Joy from Kate. "Our number 3 grandson asked his Danish girlfriend to marry him, so we will be over to Denmark once COVID is over."
Thanks. And this candle from our care team represents those sorrows that are too raw, too difficult for us to share aloud. So many of us have had losses, partners, children, grandchildren, losses that remain present with us every day. So many of us have burdens, anger, fear, and frustration, all of those things that weigh heavy on our hearts. We will light this candle for all those unspoken sorrows.
Our meditation words Our meditation words are by Jess Reynolds. On my worst days, it is gravity I am most grateful for. The way the earth pulls at me from her core, yearns for me, keeps me pressed tightly against her surface. When my own core is hollowed out, when I have no more mass than a leaf dead on the branch, still, this is enough for the earth to find me. She reaches for what little I have and says, stay. Every meditation I have ever done begins by asking me to ground myself. This is not so much an action as it is inaction, surrender, a voluntary abandonment of my own edges and tidy packaging. So sit with me now. Press the soles of your feet back into the ground you sprang from. Feel the weight of your body and know that it is glorious. You are born of soil and sun, and all the heaviness of the earth is a call to you. The earth is reaching for you. Reach back. Reach back. And so let us now sit for a while, allowing the earth to reach for us and allowing ourselves to reach back. Just for a minute or so, let us sit. And let us return to this space now.
Today's responsive reading is We Remember Them, which is adapted from a prayer by Rabbi Roland B. Gittleson. You are welcome to unmute your microphones if you like. I will read the Roman text, and you can read the italics. It may be a bit discordant, but it will be a joyous and alive sort of discord. Let's begin. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember them.
In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them.
In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them.
In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, we remember them.
In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them.
In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them.
When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them.
When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them.
When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them.
So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now part of us as we remember them.
I'm sure that many, maybe most of you recognize that reading. It's in our Unitarian Universalist hymnal, and it's oftentimes used at memorial services and at holidays like Memorial Day. In my work, I've learned to find out a bit about the author of most any piece I use, even stuff out of the hymnal. I started doing this after an embarrassing misattribution, after I found something on the internet that was attributed to the wrong person. But these days, I try to look at every author. Recently, I wanted to use a piece, but discovered the author had swung far right, and I found his current writing reprehensible. So my choice was to use the piece and take time to explain my discomfort with the author, or choose something else. I chose something else. So I will admit that I am part of what we now call the cancel culture. This reading is not like that. I looked up Rabbi Roland Gittleson and found a powerful story. Gittleson served as a chaplain in World War II in one of the deadliest battles for the Allies, Iwo Jima. Gittleson had been a pacifist, but he believed that this particular war was a just war, and he enlisted as a pacifist, becoming a Marine chaplain, serving throughout the battles on Iwo Jima. After the battles, Gittleson was asked to deliver a sermon to dedicate one of 3 military cemeteries on the island. Gittleson wrote through the night, preparing his sermon, but Christian chaplains objected to allowing a Jewish chaplain to dedicate a mostly Christian cemetery. However, the text of his sermon made it back to the United States and became widely printed in newspapers and read on the radio. This was perhaps because of the controversy, perhaps more because of its message. The sermon spoke to what he called the highest and purest democracy that the fallen gave their lives defending. He warns, "Whoever of us lifts his hand in hate against a brother or thinks himself superior to those who happen to be in the minority makes of this cemetery and of the bloody sacrifice it commemorates an empty, hollow mockery." Gittleson goes on to imagine high goals of world peace, internationalism, free of economic inequality, free of racism and religious prejudice. He consecrates not just the ground or the fallen, but dedicates us, the living, to carry on the struggle they began. Knowing that, I find the reading, "We remember them," to be even more powerful, more poignant as we remember our own fallen ones. It is a tradition in many Unitarian Universalist congregations to use the first Sunday of the new year to remember those in the congregation, as well as others who died in the last year. Admittedly, we have used Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead service, as a time to remember our dead as well. But that is a Mexican cultural tradition that doesn't fit most of our more northern congregations. Especially for this year, I think it's good for us to take this time to remember, to reflect on those among us who are no longer physically with us. So let us take this first Sunday of the new year as a time to remember and reflect on those close to us who have died in 2020. We will speak their names, recalling them into our minds and holding their presence in this sacred space. We will start with the names of those associated with this congregation who died in 2020. We will sound a bell following each name. I'm back again. Wayne Conklin. Els Abercrombie. Adolph Abercrombie. Marion Blackmer. Now there is a time for you to add other names of people who died in the last year. Again, we have allowed you to unmute your microphones. So just unmute and say the names, just the names of those you have lost in 2020. Try to give a little pause so the names are distinct and separate as best they can be. You may begin.
Don Ross.
George Thorson.
Doris Denny.
Charles White.
Barbara Wagner, Stevie Ball, Judy Roloff, Edgar Ramirez.
Dick Jackson.
Kathy Bartell.
So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them.
This reading is Burning the Old Year by the poet Naomi Shihab Nye. Letters swallow themselves in seconds. Notes, friends tied to the doorknob, transparent scarlet paper sizzle like moth wings, marry the air. So much of any year is flammable. Lists of vegetables, partial poems, orange swirling flame of days. So little is a stone, where there was something and suddenly isn't. And absence shouts, celebrates, leaves a space. I begin again with the smallest numbers, quick dance, shuffle of losses and leaves. Only the things I didn't do crackle after the blazing dies.
Good, good. Now, I want to acknowledge that for some of us, 2020 was a year which brought some happy news and good events. Children, grand and great-grandchildren were born, people got married, other goals and milestones were achieved. I want to hold up and bless those good things. And at the same time, many, I think maybe most of us, will remember 2020 as a challenging, even difficult year. The Washington Post did an informal survey asking its readers to sum up the year in one word or phrase. The top 3 words were exhausting, lost, and chaotic. These words certainly capture my mood for the year. A slightly more scientific survey by researchers Peter Dodd and Chris Danforth uses Twitter data to measure our collective happiness. Now, the researchers acknowledge the bias in this study, and that's why I use the words slightly more scientific. Still, in the 12 years they've run this study, 2020 was the most miserable year in the batch. But there are bright spots. Most of us, I am sure, would agree that the outcome of the U.S. presidential election is a bright spot, where the ordinary process of democracy was challenged and prevailed, where citizens in record numbers took their voting responsibility seriously. About the actual outcome, I think of mathematician Freeman Dyson's words. Elections are held not to choose the best rulers, but to help us get rid of the worst without bloodshed. And while we're not quite done, we hope for the proper completion of the transfer of power with little bloodshed. We hope that the U.S. election will be a reminder to others in the world of the promise in the peril of democracy. I think at a more profound level, the pandemic has forced us to face many things. The tangible costs of inattention to science and rationality, the health and economic costs to the poorest and most oppressed among us, the fragility of many of our healthcare systems. On the other hand, the pandemic is forcing us to reimagine how we might do many things: work, travel, education, even church. The pandemic has opened us to the possibility of a cleaner, more environmentally sound and sustainable world. Still, I think the overall valence, the tenor of 2020 for most of us, is somber and sorrowful. There is much about 2020 we want to let go of, much we want to move on from. In the New York Times this week was a letter to a person in the future, a letter written by a 12-year-old girl, Audrey Cho, to her future self, reminding her future self not to forget the lessons of the pandemic. In the letter, she described struggling with the pandemic, with spending too much time with her mom, with not getting to see her grandparents for Thanksgiving, with Christmas unended. And then she says, I quote, "I am struggling and would do anything to get out of 2020 and this pandemic, to see my friends and family normally. You," she says to her future self, "you are able to do that. You have what I want so badly. So please, I urge you to enjoy your life, your friends, your family, your experiences. Remember, everything is replaceable and unimportant, but people are the only true thing that matters in this modern day world." As harsh as 2020 has been for us, it has offered us important lessons. We simply need to pay attention. One of the shortest poems of that great poet, Mary Oliver, is titled "The Uses of Sorrow." It begins, "In my sleep, I dreamed this poem. Someone I love once gave me a box full of darkness. It took me years to understand that this, too, was a gift." So Matt again, my hope is that in years to come, we may look back on 2020 and see that it, too, was a gift. As we dream of a hopeful future in our world for the new year, there are also some things we would very much like to put behind us from the old year. At times here at the fellowship, we've used the ritual of the burning bowl for this kind of letting go of things. We'll do a burning bowl now, but it'll be a little different this year, as so many things have had to be. We invite you to type a word or short phrase into the chat, and we will write them on these strips of paper, and then read those words aloud, and then consign them to the purifying flames. Please keep your chat entries brief so we can actually write the words on those small strips. Now, if you want to put something behind you that is deeply personal, consider giving us kind of a code word, something that represents that thing to you. We'll write that code word on and burn it, and you and only you will know its true meanings. They're piling up. I got to get going here. The first one Trump. The second one is anger. Is that right? Anger. Accidents and surgery. We got to get chat back a second. Hold on a second. Regret. Hate. Doom scrolling. Not seeing family. Could you move the camera up just a little bit? Separation. No F to F. Despair. Not moving. Anxiety. Illness. Separation. Loneliness. Disinformation. Liking to burn things too much. Very well. May what you have released here be forever gone from your spirit and cease to trouble you. May you be relieved and renewed, ever mindful that love is always more powerful than fear, and that compassion is the key to freedom from resentment.
This reading is Letter to the People of the Future by John Cummins, a Unitarian Universalist minister. I would like to note personally that Reverend Cummins was my minister emeritus when Chris and I went to First Universalist Church in Minneapolis. He spoke many times, and we got to know he and his wife Drew very well. So I didn't choose this reading, Matt did, so it was a very nice surprise to see it. Reverend Cummins writes, "My distant children, you will look back on us with astonishment at the truths which stared us in the face and which we did not see. You will look with wonder at the bright toys we created and used only for the rape of the planet and one another. It will seem to you strange beyond believing that we reached for the stars and did not know the simplest keys for living well together. for living well together. But I know this also, you of the future, you with your libraries and fountains, you and your star cities, know that even in our slumbers, we dreamed. In our fumbling, shadowed search for mistaken glories, even in our clumsy cruelties, it was for you that we dreamed. Beneath the piled up centuries, below the lost and ruined rubble of all our striving, it was you who lay safe, enfolded in the womb of our dreaming. You, the first cause of all our daring. Even now, it brings comfort to know that it shall one day be as the wise among us have foretold. In that far age, in the chrysalis of time, it will be your source of pride that your ancestors, born into a universe without justice or mercy, bethought themselves of justice and mercy and put them there. Remember us for this.
When I first connected with the Unitarian Universalist Church just over 30 years ago, one of the things that attracted me was that positive, expansive, hopeful tenor of the messages I heard on Sunday. It was like no other religious community I had encountered. There was no focus on personal salvation, nor brokenness, nor sin. If there was a thread running through the theology of that congregation, it was that we are all good. And yes, there is a lot of work to do in the world, but yes, we would achieve it. We would absolutely make the world better with our efforts. I think that our reading by now retired UU Minister John Cummins' Letter to the People of the Future captured that sentiment. Perhaps in that congregation lingered the theology of James Freeman Clarke, a great 19th century Unitarian minister and denominational leader. Clarke spoke of a positive theology that included the phrase, progress of mankind onward and upward forever. It was a hopeful idea in contrast to the often pessimistic theologies of other religions. But this idea of progress has largely been rejected within Unitarian Universalism today. Admittedly, the idea of progress was often limited to technological or economic progress without much focus on progress in more challenging areas, such as peace or equality or environmental sustainability. And certainly a mid-19th century idea of progress came to be seen as naive after World War I and II and the nuclear arms race and continued racial inequality, not just in the United States, but in many other so-called advanced nations. And yet, while I have my many quibbles with the Harvard psychology professor Steven Pinker, I still find his 2011 book, Better Angels of Our Nature, Why Violence Has Declined, to be a powerful argument for hope and progress. Pinker delves into the scientific research to show that recent times have been less violent than times in the past, that rights and protections have been extended, if imperfectly, more widely to minorities, to women, children, and animals. Perhaps we are less inclined to see this progress because we can witness violence so readily today, right in the news or even on our social media feeds on our phones. We just don't have such video clips of ancient and horrific violence to compare to. But if we step back, we can see a progressive trend and hope that it will continue, perhaps with fits and starts into the future. In Letter to the People of the Future, we are invited to imagine a hopeful future in which our distant descendants might look back on us with astonishment and pride. That we, born into a universe without justice and mercy, are able to dream those ideas up and make them so. It is my hope that even as we engage in the multitude of social justice struggles against climate change, racism, economic injustice, despotism, femicide, oh, the list goes on, and it's overwhelming, that even as we do this work, that there will remain before us a bright, hopeful goal that because of our efforts, 2021 will be a better year than 2020, and 2022 will be better still. Because of our efforts, the world will be better, and we will be remembered for this. May it be so. Blessed be.
Our hymn is number 354, We Laugh, We Cry. This is by Unitarian Universalist Methodist. You took it away. Slight glitch, sorry. This is by Unitarian Universalist hymnodist Shelley Jackson Dunham, who wrote it while serving at as the worship director of The Mountain, a UU camp and conference center in North Carolina. This hymn has long been a favorite at LCUUF. We'll sing verses 1, 3, and 4 on your screens. Please join Linda in singing. Okay.
We laugh, we cry, we live, we die, we dance, we sing our song. We need to feel there's something here to which we can belong. We need to feel the freedom just to have some time alone. But most of all, we need close friends, which are our very own. And we believe in life and in the strength of love. And we have found a need to be together. We have our hearts to give, we have our thoughts to receive, and we believe that sharing is an answer. Our lives are full of wonder and our time is very brief. The death of one among us fills us all with pain and grief. But as we live, so shall we die, and when our lives are done, the memories we shared with friends, they will linger on, and we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found a place to be together. We have the right to grow, we have the gift to believe that peace within our living is an answer. We seek elusive answers to the questions of this life. We seek to put an end to all the waste of human strife. We search for truth, equality, and blessed peace of mind. And then we come together here to make sense of what we find. And we believe in life and in the strength of love. And we have found a joy being together. And in our search for peace, maybe we'll finally see, even to question truly is an answer.
This is the time in our service when we ask that you remember that we share our gifts here through pledging and donations. We're not meeting in person now, but our connections to each other and our contributions to the community continue. Instructions for payments to the fellowship are on a slide during the announcements before the service every week. And while you're considering your gifts to the fellowship, remember that each month LCUUF donates 5,000 pesos or more to an organization providing food aid in our lakeside community. When you pay your pledge, please add something to share the basket, as you used to place pesos in our physical basket. You can donate in the same way that you pay your pledge, but please donate Share the Basket separately or indicate what part of your donation is for Share the Basket. Your offerings are greatly received. Sorry, for January, these donations will go to the Tepewa Centro community, which serves a very poor barrio in Chapala. Let us extinguish our chalices with these words, which we read together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we keep in our hearts and share with all the world.
Okay. Our closing words. May this past year remind us of our fragility and our promise, both that everything we have, everything we created can be gone in an instant, and that we, steadily and over time, can create what is good, create justice and mercy, and put them into the world, and thus make our descendants proud. After our postlude, we'll have a 5-minute break, and then Lorna will come on to lead a discussion of our proposed budget for 2021 to 2022. We hope you'll get some coffee or tea and stay with us.
The postlude today is one of my favorite ballads dating back to the mid-70s. It's by Bernard Igner, and one of my favorite arrangers, Quincy Jones, made an arrangement of this which became quite well known. I would like to dedicate this performance to somebody who passed away on January the 1st. Her name was Candice Luciano. She was married to a piano student of mine, and she was well known in the community, especially with her work with Lakeside Little Theatre. Rest in peace, Candice.
But never much too soon. Yes, everything must change. The young become the old, and mysteries unfold. 'Cause that's the way of time. Nothing and no one goes unchanged. There were not accept. Except rain comes from the clouds, sun lights up the skies, and humming